The rain in New York doesn't just fall, it drowns. Felicia Reeves was used to drowning. Between 3 jobs and a past she couldn't outrun, she was a ghost in a cheap uniform, moving through a world of crystal glasses and golden light without leaving a mark, without being seen, without being known. That was the plan. That was survival. Then she saw it. A drop of death falling into a glass of vintage red. In front of her sat Daniel Cross, a billionaire with a target on his back and a world that wanted him cold. She had 3 seconds. She could stay a ghost, or she could scream. Felicia chose to spill the water. And in that moment, she traded her anonymity for a bullet hole with her name on it. This is her story. Stay with me, because by the end, you will never look at an ordinary moment the same way again. Felicia Reeves was 27 years old, and she had mastered the art of disappearing. Not literally, though sometimes she wished that were possible. No, Felicia had perfected something more practical, the kind of invisibility that kept you safe in a world that had already hurt you once. She moved quietly, spoke carefully, and kept her head down. In her experience, the people who drew attention to themselves were the ones who ended up in trouble. She worked as a server at Carver's, one of those rare Manhattan restaurants that existed in a different dimension from the city outside its doors. The kind of place where the lighting was always golden, where the tablecloths were changed between every sitting, where a single bottle of wine cost more than Felicia made in a week. Midtown's elite came here to be seen, to negotiate, to celebrate. Felicia came here to survive. 3 jobs kept her and her 7-year-old daughter Zoe afloat. Carver's 5 nights a week, a Brooklyn bakery on weekend mornings, a cleaning shift at a law firm on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Every dollar was already spoken for before she earned it. Rent, groceries, Zoe's school supplies, the occasional doctor's visit. But Felicia had a dream tucked underneath all of it. A brochure from NYU's nursing program that she'd folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone white. One day, when there was enough saved, when Zoe was a little older, one day. On a bitterly cold January night, the kind of cold that comes off the Hudson like a warning, Felicia worked the private dining room at Carver's. It was the most prestigious assignment in the restaurant, reserved for the city's most powerful guests. Her manager, a tightly wound man named Gerald, had briefed her with the intensity of a military operation. Table 7. 5 guests, Mr. Elliot Hargrove and Associates. You are to be attentive, efficient, and above all, invisible. Whatever is discussed at that table is not your business. Understood? Felicia understood perfectly. Elliot Hargrove. She'd heard the name the way everyone in New York had, from headlines, from overheard conversations on the subway, from the kind of profile pieces that ran in magazines she could never afford. He was 31 years old, had turned his late father's struggling real estate firm into a technology and property empire spanning 14 states. Some people called him a visionary, others called him dangerous. The financial press called him the most disruptive force in Manhattan since the last recession. When he walked into the private dining room, Felicia felt the temperature of the air change. He wasn't what she expected. No performance of power, no loud entrance. Elliot Hargrove moved quietly, the way people do when they don't need to announce themselves. Dark eyes that absorbed everything, a stillness about him that felt more like control than calm. He noticed her immediately, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, more like a reflex, the way people with sharp instincts notice everything. Then he looked away, and she became invisible again, exactly as planned. 4 associates joined him, older men, the kind whose suits told a story of decades in rooms like this one. And then, arriving late with an apologetic smile, came a man named Carter Voss. Carter was younger than the others, mid-30s, handsome in a practiced way, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. He greeted Elliot like an old friend, shook hands around the table, took his seat with the smooth grace of a man performing a role he'd rehearsed. Felicia poured his water and stepped back. Everything looked exactly like it should. But something in her chest, something sharpened by years of reading rooms, of knowing when a situation was about to turn, that something was screaming. The dinner unfolded the way these dinners always did. Felicia brought courses, refilled glasses, moved like a shadow through the edges of the room. The men talked. Mergers, acquisitions, figures with so many zeros they lost meaning. Elliot listened more than he spoke, which she noticed. The talkers in these rooms were rarely the most dangerous ones. It was during the entree that everything changed. Felicia was refilling water glasses, moving clockwise around the table. She reached Carter's side just as he leaned forward, gesturing at a document spread across the table, drawing every eye in the room to a column of numbers. His other hand, the one no one was watching, moved toward Elliot's wine glass. Felicia saw it. The tiny vial, the practiced tilt of the fingers, the way the liquid disappeared into the deep red wine without a ripple. Time stretched. Her mind ran the calculation in the space between one heart date and the next. She could be wrong. She could be imagining it. She could walk away, finish her shift, go home to Zoe and never think about this again. Or she could act and risk everything. Her job, her safety, her daughter's stability. Zoe's face flashed through her mind. 7 years old, sleeping with her stuffed bear, completely unaware of what her mother was about to do. Felicia moved. Her elbow caught Elliot's water glass perfectly, just enough force to send it cascading across the table and directly into his lap. Ice-cold water, white tablecloth, a stunned silence falling over the room like a held breath. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She was already reaching for linens, already apologizing, already in motion. The table erupted in murmurs. One of the older men laughed. Carter Voss went very still. Elliot stood, ice water dripping from his suit. He looked at Felicia, not with anger, but with something she couldn't quite name, something that saw too much. "It's fine," he said quietly. "These things happen. I'll bring a fresh clay setting immediately, and a new glass of wine." She reached for the contaminated glass. His hand closed around her wrist, gently, firmly. "Leave it," Elliot said. His voice was soft enough that only she could hear it. His eyes held hers for exactly 3 seconds. Felicia stepped back. She watched him push the wine glass to the edge of the table, out of reach, with the calm precision of a man who had already understood everything. The dinner continued, but something had shifted. Carter Voss barely spoke for the rest of the meal. When he excused himself after dessert, claiming a sudden illness, his face was the color of old chalk. 2 of Felicia's colleagues helped him to a chair near the exit. He left without finishing his goodbyes. Elliot's eyes followed him to the door. Then they found Felicia's again across the room. 3 heartbeats. Neither looked away. If this story is moving you, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what you would have done in Felicia's shoes. Your words reach more people than you know. And if someone you love needs to hear a story like this today, share it with them right now. The private dining room emptied slowly. Felicia cleared plates in a controlled daze, her hands moving on autopilot, while her mind raced through every possible consequence of what she'd done. She felt him before she heard him. Elliot Hargrove stood in the doorway of the private room, hands in his pockets, watching her work. When she finally turned to face him, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Hargrove?" That was quite a spill. "Yes, sir. I apologize again for the timing was interesting." Felicia said nothing. Elliot crossed the room and laid several bills on the table beside her. More money she made in 2 weeks. She stared at it, then back at him. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you should, because what you did tonight was worth considerably more than what's on that table." He paused. "I'll have the wine tested by morning. I think we both already know what they'll find." Her throat tightened. She said nothing. He turned to leave. At the doorway, he stopped. "Be careful, Felicia." Her name, soft and deliberate. Some people don't forget acts of kindness, and some people don't forgive acts of interference. Then he was gone. The walk to the subway felt longer than usual. The January wind cut through her coat like it had something to say. Felicia clutched her bag and moved quickly, her eyes touching every shadow. At home, her neighbor Mrs. Taylor was dozing on the couch, a nature documentary playing on mute. She thanked her, pressed money she couldn't spare into her hands, and stood for a long time in Zoe's doorway after Mrs. Taylor left. Her daughter slept on her side, one arm around a stuffed bear named Captain, her breathing slow and even, the most peaceful thing Felicia had ever seen. "I'm sorry, baby," Felicia whispered. "I think I just complicated everything." 3 days later, a man named Roland Pierce called. He identified himself as Elliot Hargrove's head of security. He was professional, calm, and very direct. The wine contained a cardiac agent, concentrated enough to induce a fatal event within 20 minutes. "Mr. Hargrove would like to meet with you." Felicia sat down on her kitchen floor. "He would also like you to know that Carter Voss has vanished. Passport used at JFK 2 days ago, destination unknown. And Miss Reeves, the people who hired Voss know that their plan failed. They're going to want to understand why. That means they're going to look at everyone at that table, including the server who spilled the water." They met the following evening at a quiet coffee shop in the West Village. Not the kind of place you found in travel guides, tucked behind a florist on a side street, warm and unhurried. Elliot was already there when she arrived. He stood when she entered, a gesture that caught her off guard. She sat across from him and said, before he could speak, "I have a daughter. She's 7. Whatever is happening, she can't be touched by it." Something moved behind his eyes. "I know about Zoe. I know about the nursing program brochure. I know about your Tuesday cleaning shifts and your weekend bakery hours. I had you researched after that night." The anger rose fast. "You had no right. I had every reason. You saved my life. I needed to understand who you were." He held her gaze steadily. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because you need to understand the situation clearly so you can protect yourself and her." He slid a card across the table. "A single phone number, nothing else. This reaches me directly, any hour. If anything feels wrong, a car that appears twice, a stranger who lingers, you call immediately." Felicia looked at the card for a long time. "I just wanted to do my job," she said finally. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm here." He was quiet for a moment. Most people would have looked away. It would have been the rational choice, the safe choice. It didn't feel like a choice. Elliot studied her. "No, I don't think it did." He left money for the drinks and stood. "Go home to Zoe, act normal, trust your instincts. They're better than you know." Felicia walked home through the West Village with the card in her pocket and the city humming around her, indifferent as always. She passed a woman handing out flyers, a teenager on a skateboard, 2 men arguing in a doorway. Ordinary New York, the kind of ordinary that felt suddenly fragile. That night, she heard her doorknob turn at 2 a.m. She froze in her bed, every nerve awake. The sound came again, careful, testing, then footsteps retreating down the hall. Her phone lit up before she could reach for it. A text from Elliot's number. "My security just intercepted someone at your building. He claimed to be a resident. He isn't. Pack what you need. We're moving you tonight." Felicia looked at Zoe's door down the hall. She packed in 12 minutes. They drove through the Lincoln Tunnel as dawn was beginning to break somewhere behind the Manhattan skyline. Zoe slept against Felicia's shoulder in the back of the car, Captain the bear tucked under her arm, completely unbothered by the upheaval of being woken before sunrise. "Are we going on an adventure, Mama?" "Yes, baby, a little one." "Is it a good adventure or a scary one?" Felicia pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head. "A good one, I promise." The safe house was in New Jersey, A quiet neighborhood of old trees and wide streets, a white house with green shutters, and a yard that Zoe immediately declared was enormous. Elliot was waiting on the porch with coffee. He looked different outside of Carver's, less like a headline, more like a person. "Welcome, both of you." Zoe looked up at him with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old. "Are you Mama's friend?" Elliot glanced at Felicia. "I'm working on it," he said. Over the next 2 weeks, while Elliot's security team and legal counsel dismantled the conspiracy that Carter Voss was the face of, tracing it back to 2 former board members who had resisted Elliot's corporate reforms, Felicia and Zoe settled into a strange, suspended kind of life. Zoe loved the yard. She named 2 squirrels and conducted a detailed investigation into what lived under the back porch. Felicia read her nursing brochure for the first time in months without the weight of impossibility pressing down on it. Elliot visited most evenings. At first, they talked about the investigation, updates, next steps, timelines. But gradually, the conversations shifted. He told her about his father, a man who built power through methods that left damage in their wake. He told her about the loneliness of inheriting an empire and trying to rebuild it into something worth having. She told him about leaving an abusive relationship 3 years ago with nothing but Zoe and a determination that had surprised even herself. About the woman at a Seltzer intake desk who had handed her a phone number that had changed everything. A woman she had never seen again, whose name she had never known. "She probably has no idea what that moment did," Felicia said one evening. "That's the thing about those moments. They ripple out in ways the person who created them never gets to see." He looked at her steadily, like a waitress who spills a glass of water at exactly the right time. Felicia looked away. Outside the window, Zoe was chasing one of her squirrels across the yard. "You're safe now, Felicia. Both of you. The threat is contained. The board members are facing federal charges. Carter Voss is in custody in Toronto." She exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. "You can go home, Felicia." She went home. The apartment felt smaller than she remembered, and also, somehow, more precious. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, running her hand along the counter, relearning the shape of her own life. Zoe went back to school on Monday. Felicia went back to Carver's on Tuesday, though she gave notice the same week. She had other plans now. Elliot had been straightforward about it. He had offered to cover her nursing school tuition, not as charity, he was careful to say, but as an investment. "You saved my life. Let me invest in yours." She had argued. He had waited out the argument with patience she suspected he'd had to learn. "The world needs more nurses like you would be," he said finally, "especially the kind who act before they think twice." She enrolled at NYU that spring. It was harder than she expected and more fulfilling than she had imagined. She studied late at night after Zoe was asleep, a habit she'd developed across years of working multiple jobs. The exhaustion was different now. It had a direction to it, a destination. Elliot kept his distance the way he'd promised. A message here, a quiet conversation there. He never overstepped. He respected the life she was building on her own terms, and she found herself respecting that more than almost anything else about him. When her car broke down in October, it was repaired within a day by a mechanic she hadn't called. When Zoe got a bad ear infection in February and the pediatric specialist had a 3-week wait, an appointment appeared the following morning. When Felicia doubted herself, and she did, often, in the particular 3 a.m. way that nursing school has of finding every crack in your confidence, a message would arrive. "You're stronger than this moment. Keep going." She graduated 3 years later, top of her class, NYU's pediatric nursing program, which she had once carried around in a folded brochure like a message in a bottle. At the ceremony, Zoe, now 10 years old, missing a tooth, wearing her best dress, stood on her seat and cheered loud enough that the family 2 rows over started laughing. Mrs. Taylor dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd brought specifically for the occasion. And Elliot was there, in the back row, almost out of sight, clapping with a quiet pride that Felicia only caught because she was looking for it. They went to dinner after the ceremony. Felicia, Zoe, Mrs. Taylor, and Elliot at a restaurant in the West Village that bore no resemblance to Carver's. Loud and warm, with small tables too close together, and a menu that had nothing unpronounceable on it. Zoe told Elliot with great seriousness that she was planning to be either a marine biologist or a professional squirrel researcher, and she needed his opinion on which career had better salary prospects. He told her with equal seriousness that she should probably pursue both simultaneously. Later, after Zoe had fallen asleep in the car and Mrs. Taylor was dozing beside her, Felicia and Elliot stood outside her apartment building in January cold. A year to the night, almost, since a January evening had changed everything. I keep thinking about the woman at the shelter intake desk, the one who gave me the number that helped me leave. She never knew what happened after. She just handed me a piece of paper and I walked out, and she probably forgot me by the end of her shift. But you didn't forget her, Elliot said. No, I never forgot her. I don't even know her name, and she's the reason Zoe and I are standing here. She looked up at the sky, the stars somewhere above the ambient glow of 10 million apartment windows. That's what I want to be, for someone. I don't need them to know my name. I just want the ripple to keep going. Elliot was quiet for a moment. You already are that person, he said. You have been from the beginning. I'm just the one who happened to be standing next to the glass. Felicia smiled. Maybe that's the real story, not about conspiracies or billionaires or any of the drama, just about how far one person's courage can travel. And how you never see where the wave ends, he said. She went inside, carried Zoe to bed, tucked Captain the Bear under her daughter's arm, stood in the doorway for a long moment, counting her blessings one by one. A career that mattered, a daughter who was safe and loved, a life built on her own terms, with a little help she had the grace to accept. And somewhere in this city, in a shelter and a late-night diner, and an emergency room or a restaurant where someone was struggling and afraid and trying to be invisible, someone was standing at the edge of a moment. 3 seconds to decide. Felicia had made her choice, and the ripple was still moving. Maybe yours is already moving too, you just haven't seen where it lands yet. Be the person who acts. Be the one who spills the water glass. The world needs more people like that, and if you're still reading this, I think you already are one. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone brave or made you want to be a little braver yourself, please follow along for more stories just like this one. Every story we share is a ripple. Every person who follows helps it travel further. And if you know someone who needs this today, send it to them. You never know how far that one small act of kindness goes. Thank you for being here.